session. A lot of us in CASC, well, not to say that there's a lot of us in CASC, but a lot of us who are in CASC do teach, and often we're teaching education, experiential education courses. And we don't always get a chance to talk as much about our teaching as we do about our research, which is a bit of a shame, because I think teaching is also a really important thing that we bring to the co-op sector, not just our research. And in principle, we are probably one of the key assets for the sector when it comes to education. Well, it's Principle 5 and everybody's supposed to do it. In terms of reaching new people who might be coming into the cooperative sector, we are sort of, in a sense, I don't want to say gatekeepers, but a lot of those people go through the university. So we are the ones who have the most ready access to those people in principle. Because if they don't hear about cooperatives in higher education, they're going to learn about it only accidentally at some stage. And so we're missing a lot of people. So that's why we thought we'd talk about experiential education and the importance of that in bringing new people into the co-op sector, because people don't learn about co-ops on the farm anymore, or not as much as they used to, right? So we need to find new ways to bring those people in. So we're going to have 3 presentations today. Jennifer Sumner, who teaches at OISE in University of Toronto, is going to speak first. And then John Simoulidis, who's in the Business and Society program at York University, is going to speak. And then I'll have some sort of concluding, some more strategic remarks about experiential education and higher education. And this session is being recorded, so we don't have a huge turnout right now, but because it's being recorded, we can always promote it a little bit later to people to watch. So that being said, I think we're going to start with Jennifer. Do you want to share your screen, Jennifer?
I will. Thanks, Darryl. And so I'm going to talk about experiential learning in practicum placements. I teach a course in this, but I just wanted to talk generally about practicums first. And basically, in many ways, practicums reflect the importance of context in education, that you're just not sort of learning within the ivory tower, but there is a context to what you're learning. And as Darryl mentioned, there's a focus on experiential learning. And that's really when the learner is directly in touch with the realities being studied. And, you know, rather than learning them from a book or from talking about them in the classroom, they actually learn from the context that they're in. Well, certainly practicums have different functions. And it's interesting, some of them aim to apply theoretical knowledge from the classroom in the practicum. And other people use them to raise problems and issues that then they take back to the classroom that trigger investigations and knowledge. I'm just going to shrink there we go. All right. So there's some very positive aspects to practicums, because really they have a lot of opportunities for students, and I think the opportunities that they can give to students within the cooperative sector are enormous. They certainly introduce students to the world of work, to career prospects and job skills, but also interpersonal skills and social skills, as well as they learn on the job performance, enhance employment prospects because of what they've done in the practicums, improved attitudes towards employment, facilitated integration into the work environment, greater maturity, and more positive contributions to the classroom itself. But there are negative aspects as well. Sometimes there's real lack of success in trying to integrate the theory that students learn in the classroom with the practice, in the practicum. There's difficulty for some practicums in organizing those experiences themselves. It's sometimes hard to find placements for students. Perhaps students learn very narrow range of technical skills instead of being able to think more broadly about in terms of systems and organizations when they are really focused on practicum learning. They can also have very poor, uneven supervision from mentors in the practicums. And those mentors themselves can be not well prepared for being able to become mentors to students. Sometimes the experiences that students have can undermine the whole educational program they come with, which could have some serious consequences. And there's always that worry of the exploitation of students as cheap labor. There's, according to the literature, there's 4 types of practicums. There's apprenticeship practicums, academic practicums, growth or case practicums, and there's also what's called an articulated practicum, which is used in a variety of disciplines. And it really works to develop links between cognitive and experiential learning, between theory and practice, that whole linking between theory and practice. And I'm going to speak about an articulated practicum because that's the one that I teach. It falls into that category. And it's the practicum in adult education and community development. That's a program at OISE. And within that, the students can choose an elective graduate level 1 semester course. That's a practicum. It's a pass-fail course, so we don't grade them, individually. And they spend 3 to 4 hours per week in their practicum placement. That means about 36 to 48 hours for the semester that they do in their placement. And they also come to class once a week for 1 3-hour class. So they're doing almost double duty in a way by taking a practicum. One thing that's interesting in the adult education and community development program is students find their own placements. That's partly because they're graduate students, so we're not as worried about them as we might be undergrads. But also a large majority of the graduate students in the adult education and community development program are mature students who have spent 5, 10, 15, 20 years out in the field and then come back to do their master's or their PhD. So they are quite capable of finding their own placements. And that takes a lot of the organizational work out of my hands, which is great. What students do is they negotiate with some community organization about doing a placement. And students bring certain skills to those placements, which would be useful to the organizations, but they also bring certain wishes in the sense like they'd also like to develop new skills. And they work with a mentor. And so that's the requirement, that they find within that organization somebody who agrees to mentor them and to sort of answer questions, give them advice, steer them through the process. So it's a very positive process for both the community organization and for the students themselves. Now, in this practicum that I'm talking about, the practicum that's in the adult education and community development program, there's different types of projects that students tend to carry out. And this is keeping in mind that these students come from an educational institute. So many of them are education oriented. So the students, in their practicum, some of them create or evaluate or organize or deliver programs or do some of all of those. They create and review organizational practices. They create online resources. They develop curricula, they develop courses, websites, and manuals. Some of them carry out research. Some of them prepare and deliver workshops, and others create facilitation materials. So there's really quite a range of projects that students do carry out for these community organizations. Now, the types of organizations are always interesting. I'm always wonderfully surprised and proud that the kind of work that the students do. It's mostly in nonprofit organizations, and some of them work in community centers, some of them work in community health centers, others work in Indigenous organizations. And there was, for example, one student who was an Innu woman who was doing her master's, and she worked at the Native Center at U of T, and she was teaching Inuktitut to people who wanted to learn the language. And that was her placement, that she taught. She was busy teaching for one semester in Inuktitut. And not only did she get Innu students who were coming in and who were very interested in this, and a number of other Indigenous students, but she also had people coming from the linguistics department at University of Toronto, because they were really interested in what Inuktitut looked like. And so, and how it was taught and how it was spoken and organized. Students have done placements at the Center for Social Innovation, and they've also done placements at in different LGBTQ plus organizations. For example, 2 years ago, there was one student who gave a series of workshops to parents of LGBTQ plus children. And so she organized and gave those workshops. Some people work in settlement organizations with new immigrants. And we had a student who did a placement she was working with the City of Toronto to teach sex education to new immigrants. And it was a program that they wanted taught, and she was the person to do it because of her background that she had. A number of students work in women's organizations. They also work in food banks across the GTA. One has worked for Acorn Canada, some work for cooperatives, community arts organizations as well, doing community art projects. Some have worked for some of the big hospitals in Toronto, teaching staff, or bringing in people from the outside to learn, using the hospital as a springboard for public health issues and that sort of thing. Some have taught at community colleges worked there in terms of their practicum, as well as the Canadian Mental Health Association, and even the Art Gallery of Ontario. There was a student who got her dream placement at the Art Gallery of Ontario. And then she complained throughout her whole placement time when she was in class that her mentor never had the time to spend with her. So she was really doing her project almost unaided by herself. But it turned out at the end of her placement, they offered her a job. So she was thrilled. It was just what she had always wanted, but it had been a bit difficult in terms of a process. And some students work at the University of Toronto themselves. There's several places they find placements, including the Family Care Office at the University of Toronto. They are always looking each year for one practicum student to give workshops to women who live in their residences at University of Toronto who experience spousal abuse. So it's quite a range of kinds of placements that students find and that they carry out each year. In the classroom, they've got the 3-hour class as well as their placement. It's a time for reflection and support and presentations, and they also have to hand in a final reflective paper. The reflection is mostly about thinking about what you're learning and how you could learn it better, or how you could learn it differently, or what went well. So teaching people to reflect on their work experiences and their experiential learning, and have that iterative kind of process between theory and practice. They also get a lot of support from their peers in the classroom, which has become very important for the students, because many practicums are done that you're just thrown out and you do your practicum, but you don't have a lot of people maybe to talk to besides your mentor. But they come back to the class every week and they bring their sort of the great things they've done and their milestones they've made, as well as the problems they're facing. And I remember one year a student said that her mentor at her placement had simply said to her, "I think you're here because you're trying to take my job." And that's a bit of a shocking kind of thing for someone to say, let alone to have that person to be your mentor. So she wanted advice from her peers about how she should proceed in that kind of a work atmosphere. So it's can sometimes be challenging for students in a placement, but it's often very rewarding. They give presentations to each other about where they are within their practicums, and then they hand in that final reflective paper. But about half the classroom time over the semester is given over to skills development, because I think it's a great opportunity for students to learn some of the hands-on skills that they would like to learn. They're in a graduate course in adult education and community development, but we don't teach the 10 top tips in how to teach adults. We teach, it's a graduate's level, and it's a lot of theory and a lot of reading and that sort of thing. So this is an opportunity for them to do some skills development. And at the beginning of each course, I ask the students, what skills do you folks want to learn this semester? And they vote on them, and they come up with a list of skills they want to learn. What's really interesting, as I've said, these are mature students who've been out in the field 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So many of them have wonderful skills. So they volunteer to teach each other the skills they have. So we've had in-house workshops on conflict resolution, online facilitation, event management, icebreakers, accelerated learning, stress reduction, storytelling, and even we've had 2 sessions on meditation. But we also, when from their list of skills they want to learn, between us all, we find people who can come in and teach those skills. And we've had workshops on workshop organizing, on program planning and evaluation, on public speaking, curriculum design, online learning tools, change management, grant writing. It just depends what they want to learn every year. It's always different. Working with a zero budget is not always easy, but it seems to work out. And there are wonderful resources, certainly at the University of Toronto, and I'm sure other universities, in terms of, parts of the university that do give these sorts of workshops. For this practicum in particular, students take it for a number of reasons, and one of them is to gain work experience. But what's become quite interesting is that if there's international students who are taking the Practicum course, they gain Canadian work experience, which is very difficult for international students to get started in. So it helps them with that. It certainly builds confidence in the students. I see that clearly. They establish new contacts in their field. They can broaden and deepen their resume by what they do in their practicum placement. They can get a reference letter from their mentor when they're out looking for work. They can certainly find out whether they actually enjoy that line of work. And I can remember one student who was doing some work for one of the departments at U of T, but it was work that was being done online, like research work by herself, to sort of find out all these, do all this online research. And she realized at the end of it that she really liked working with other people. She didn't like working by herself. So it helps to sort of sort those things out. She also, I told you about gaining employment. Some students gain employment out of the practicum, and they also build communities of practice that these go on after the time of the practicum. So these are why the students in this particular course tend to take the Practicum course. Final thing, I just wanted to say that I've written an article on practicums and this Practicum course in the Alberta Journal of Educational Research, if anybody's interested in it. And that's it. I can unshare my screen.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. We'll do questions at the end, everyone. So you can throw them, you can remember them, or you can throw them into the chat and we'll come back to them. Okay, so next up, John, do you want to share your screen?
Sure. Oops. Okay, yeah. Hello, welcome everyone, and I'll be presenting, and I'd like to thank Jennifer for saying a lot of the things I forgot to say in my presentation. So I will maybe make a few references to her presentation where there's absences in mine. Yeah, I'm also going to be reporting on my experience in teaching a Practicum course, a different kind. It's at the undergraduate levels, a fourth year honors Practicum course, as opposed to a graduate level one. And yeah, I want to say something about what this means for cooperative education and Principle 5. I thought I would start by just talking about how this presentation, we'll be focusing on this placement course, but especially how it could, these kinds of courses can encourage better ties between universities and cooperatives through experiential education. And I'll conclude with some thoughts about some things for the challenges for the future. I thought these two quotes were quite complimentary about on the recognizing the placement course in the context of our wider the wider economy and the massive expansion of higher education on the one hand, and the enormous scope of cooperatives in Canada on the other, make it natural for the two to intersect more than they have in the past. And if education is the lifeblood of the cooperative movement, we need to take a closer look at both how cooperatives promote the principles of education, as well as how universities can contribute to the acculturation of cooperative values in the next generation of university graduates. Yeah, I teach in a program called Business and Society, and it's at York University. It's housed in the Department of Social Science, which is an interdisciplinary social science department. And so Business and Society itself is an interdisciplinary program. We have sociologists, political scientists, and political economists, and others who have taught in the program. And it's a program which provides students with the tools needed to study the relationship between business, the economy, and society. One of the streams, this course, the Practicum course, is the Capstone Course for one of the streams of this program. And so if they're for honor students in this stream, they're required to take the social economy practicum. Some of them are a little surprised. They weren't aware of this at the beginning. I guess they weren't, you didn't look right to the end of the program to see that they had to do this practicum. So there's a little bit of friction. There was a little bit of friction with a couple of students. Didn't know that they had to devote as much time to this particular course, unlike the course Jennifer was describing. They were at least initially expected to devote up to 7 hours a day, at the practicum, in splitting time between in-class instruction and the practicum itself, the placement itself. And what they're doing, of course, is combining theory and practice, combining in-class learning with program-based placements. And so the placement is meant to help realize the program learning outcomes more so than specific course learning outcomes, although the course learning outcomes also have to align with the program learning outcomes. And the experiential education serves several pedagogical functions. It helps students better understand the relevance of the coursework that they're doing. It helps them raise new questions and new insights that they can bring back to the classroom, as Jennifer pointed out. And it might also help them explore future areas of study and career paths. In some cases, judging from some of the reflections of students from the course, they've decided that maybe the social economy, maybe the cooperative economy is not for them. And this might relate to one of the negative aspects, potential aspects of these kinds of placements that Jennifer pointed out about, the undermining of the true of the educational objective here. And it's a problem. Some of the students were not entirely satisfied with the experience, I think, and I'll talk a little bit about that in this presentation. So as I mentioned, it's a fourth-year honors capstone course, and it's just it's a very small sample. It's a sample of 12 students that I'm. It's the first time I've taught the course, and so it's really hard to generalize from this experience. But I'm just going to tell you what I've learned, from teaching this one course this one time with these 12 students, and the different three different placements that they had. As we mentioned already, experiential education learning is about bridging, theory and practice, and whether it's community service or work-based placements. Both of these types of placements are meant to emphasize career exploration and employability and professional skills development. So we, as Jennifer mentioned, in the classroom portion of this work, one of the things we do is we bring in people, experts from the Career Center, to come in and work with students on how to identify the skills that they have, how to identify the skills that they need to work on, how to identify skills that they want to acquire that they don't currently have, and how to put this all together into a CV, professional CV, of course, and present themselves to potential employers. As I mentioned, there was basically there were three placement opportunities, but two different categories. One was a community-focused experiential education opportunity, which the administrative language, institutional language, is a little bit different than we use at York than at OISE, but we refer to this as community service learning. And the organization here, it's a community organization called Green Change. It's at Jane and Finch, and it's a community economic development organization that aims to promote the interests of a marginalized and racialized community in Toronto. And so that's a slightly different type of organization than the other two work-focused experiential education opportunities students had, and where it would be more accurately characterized as work-integrated learning, as opposed to sort of community organizing, as it was with Green Change. The two opportunities students had, one was a now defunct faculty and graduate student cafe and pub called Et Al at York, and the other is Darryl and I are both sitting on the board, so full disclosure here, of Green Campus Cooperative. And one of the things Green Campus Cooperative does, besides it does a variety of things, but one of the most central things it does right now is running a social enterprise called Green Campus Cotton. It's a fair trade organic t-shirt company, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Another thing that we do in terms of providing experiential education opportunities is through the Canada Summer Jobs Program, where we just started the second successful summer job program application with we have 4 students working with us this summer, and I could talk a bit about that later on, although I won't be talking about that specifically here, because it's not about the the practicum, the placement course. We also the other thing I should point out is so in the in-class portion of the course, what we do is we invite the various supervisors of the different placement opportunities to present to students to see if we can get them aligned, linked up with the organization that best suits their own interests. Sometimes it's a perfect fit, sometimes it's not, and so sometimes it's a question of putting a little bit of work into getting those students into different placements they may not fully fit into. So there's a series of different assignments, and one of the things I'll talk about at the end is the final assignment, which is not the group assignment, but the individual assignment, which is a structured reflection final assignment. That's where we ask students to draw on the course material to examine their own experience in the placement and tell us what they've learned about the social economy, tell us what they've learned about co-ops, using the ideas from the course. So that's what this is about. And so they aside from I think 16 out of the 24 weeks in total that they spend in the course are in their placements, and the remainder is with in class, including there's a interim report that they do in the just before the fall, the end of the fall term, and then we do a check-in around reading week, I believe, as well, and then we have sort of final presentations at the end of the term. So one of the organizations that's involved with this placement is Green Change, and it's what we call community service learning opportunity for students. And it's the mission of Green Change is they've described themselves as a resident capacity building program that connects people, place, and nature to realize new possibilities for more equitable and sustainable communities. There are various kinds of assignments like supporting research on case studies, public policies and tools, community organizing strategies, and local economic opportunities. They might be tasked with developing, supporting community outreach, developing educational materials and other project materials, and all of this with the aim of contributing to the development of a community benefits framework to increase economic opportunities in the Jane Finch neighborhood. And so, for example, we have a transportation project, the Finch West LRT Local Rapid Transit Project, and one of the things the Green Change tried to do was try to work with the city, lobby the city, and Metrolinx, the organization that was building this project, to bring some of those benefits and employment opportunities and jobs to the community as well. At AL, which is maybe I won't talk about too much here since it's a defunct organization, but its mission originally was to do what a good space like this was supposed to do, which was to provide good food, good drinks to its members, as well as providing a location for social interaction and intellectual engagement, while prioritizing healthy and sustainable food and beverage options, as well as the provision of experiential education opportunities for students. And I'm going to emphasize that because I'll return to this in one of the conclusions about the experiential education opportunities for students. So some of the assignment students, there was two groups of students that were working at AL. They assisted in the development of a marketing strategy. They developed educational marketing materials, and they assisted in some market research and promoting things like the sustainability mission of the organization. And with Green Campus Cooperative, the mission of our the Green Campus Co-op is, in Green Campus Cotton in particular, is that we believe that in order to create a sustainable and equitable economic system for ourselves and future generations, we must create businesses and trading partnerships that are committed to fairness and sustainability in all aspects of their operations. And just at the Sustainable Development Goals panel earlier today, it would be nice to incorporate some of their findings into our mission as well. The accounting for sustainability is a tricky thing. Well, students at Green Campus Co-op were assisting in the development of a marketing campaign for the t-shirts that we make, developing a calendar to work with our different affinity buyers, when to contact them. And they were also involved with maintaining, developing our social media presence. And one of the students in particular was instrumental in helping us develop and redevelop our website, which was fantastic. And we also have, throughout the year, we have various events like, Fair Trade Campus Week, for example, where students would help to organize our presence there. So, I think one of the things, one of the truisms that sort of that was deepened for me was this idea that learning is a process and not an outcome. And this is something that I observed as I watched students move from the classroom to their placement experience. And again, one of the things that I think is a very important conclusion from this, from my experiences, that we really need to see talk to students throughout the process of their placements to see how they're doing, get feedback from them, throughout their placements, to see what kinds of issues they're running into, what kinds of problems. It's really important to be timely in addressing potential conflicts. You let things like that stew, and I think this is one of the big dangers, one of the big negative potentials of these kinds of placements, is that they can really undermine the goals of the project. So what co-ops can be very important sites of cooperative education, and in particular social enterprises like the Green Campus Cooperative that's involved with we attract a lot of students in the Business and Society program who think they're going to learn how to run a corporation. We spend 3 or 4 years trying to dispel them of that idea, and work with them to look at what are some potential alternatives to the conventional business and the modern corporation. And so we introduced them to things like cooperatives and the social economy, which some of you might know as the solidarity economy, based on reciprocity, based on using the market to pursue social objectives, for example. And so what I was interested in about this is not just about the curriculum, right? Not just about the readings that they were assigned, but the sort of the hidden curriculum, so to speak, right? What is it that they're learning, in this placement course, besides the texts that have been assigned, and learning the theory and applying it to that. So what by this I mean, what are the values that are at stake here? How do the principles, cooperative principles, for example, of democracy, education, concern for community, how do they relate to this experience? And specifically, what I was most concerned with, and it's the last point of Jennifer's presentation about the concern I have about the exploitation of cheap labor, right? And I think, especially in the case of one group of students, I felt that they felt particularly vulnerable to that they didn't see the real difference between what they were doing and what they could be doing in a conventional business. And so the value.
About 2 minutes, John.
2 minutes, thank you. So I'm not going to go over all these cooperative values and all these principles, but I did want to say that students come to a placement with differing levels of alignment with cooperative values and principles, and some of them come already with the shared values, and they just this is just about reinforcing their identification with these values and principles. Others, the experience helps to shape nurture elementary elements of those values that are already within them. But in other cases, with those, they have no experience of the social economy or cooperatives. It's really about enculturating individuals within cooperative organizations and inculcating those values in them. So I thought when I looked at the nature of work for these students, 3 things stuck out for me: the authority relationship, the relationship of autonomy, and the concern for community. And these are the 3 things that I wanted to assess in rereading the student structured reflections here. And so one of the things I observed was that they had very different experiences of authority, and in some cases, in one case, one group saw this very conflictual relationship, and she saw this as the effect of combining working within a cooperative and the fact that we're the educational objectives in the hierarchical bureaucratic academic setting. Another student saw quite the opposite, that the organization she was involved in was very horizontal in terms of its structure of authority, and really listened to the members of the community and try to turn them into agents of change, right? And as opposed to objects of support, as turn them activate their own agency. Some students felt like their autonomy was undermined, that there were many times where they felt our work was not being valued if we were not valued, and they really didn't see the difference between working within a co-op versus conventional business. And this is the warning I think Jennifer raised earlier. But concern for community, I think, was one of the strongest principles here. That one student says cooperatives follow ethical values with principles to help make communities stronger with their members. and working with people who are passionate about making a difference and actively taking steps to promote values of equity, community, sustainability is inspiring. So it was a kind of a, an ambiguous assessment in terms of the experience as a whole. So my final observations, my last slide, I promise. Three key observations. That number one, I think anyone who's teaching or thinking about whether they're on the supervisory side or the side of instruction has to start from the premise that students who, their initial orientation to their placement is framed by their prior experience in paid employment and the existing, framework of the ideology of work, productivity and efficiency and those kinds of relationships. And so they filter their experience through that. So unless that gets changed, right, this can be an obstacle to creating a fulfilling experience. One student has changed. The one student said, given my corporate background, I also learned a valuable lesson about unlearning ideas that may not apply to the social economy, that I thought was inspiring. Secondly, one of the key challenges for cooperative acculturation of students is in ensuring opportunities to feel valued, important, and included. And this will help them develop their sense of transformative agency and membership, within a community, within the cooperative itself. And finally, consciously incorporating experiential education into the mission of cooperatives themselves will help to forge stronger ties between universities and co-ops while simultaneously realizing the principle 5. Okay, and that's the conclusion of my presentation.
Thanks, John. So if you can, good, that's good. So one last presentation here, which is going to be very quick. And that's by me. So I'll make sure that it's very quick. I just need to go to, oops. I should know how to do this by now.
Slideshow, yeah. Play from the start. Oh, you got to scroll up.
Play from start. There we go. Okay. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about experiential education today. Whoops, that wasn't the subtitle. And I want to distinguish between experiential education that happens in our programs. I want to call that the easy part. Now, I don't think experiential education is easy at all. So let's get out that way. But if you have a program that drives students into it, you have a structure to work with. And that helps a lot in trying to do experiential education. For us as a sector, the harder part is, can we reach out to students who are not in our programs, and should we do that? So those are the two things I want to talk about. Actually, I don't want to talk about the first one at all because we just talked about all that stuff. So I really only want to talk about the second part, and it's reaching out to students outside of our programs and universities. So the first question is, why do we want to do that? So as an organization at CASC, our membership extends to about 10 universities in Canada, maybe about 15 programs, because most of the people who come from university are all in the same program. Now, if you look at in Canada, I didn't realize this, but there's 97 universities in Canada now. So we're just representing a little over 10% of those universities, and there's thousands of programs. So the vast majority of people, students in Canada, have no access to experiential education about co-ops. And we know this, anecdotally at least, that most people in the co-op sector sort of fall into it accidentally, unless, they've had parents who just sort of facilitate some of that, who've been co-op members and things. And as a result, that means the co-op sector is losing a lot of talent and energy, and especially in newly developing fields. So the question then is, how do we reach out to other programs within our own universities, and how do we reach out to students in other places as well, and perhaps even other students who are not in universities? So one thing John didn't mention, for example, at York, there is a placement course, a new placement course, which goes across different programs. So there might be students of that course in engineering, and students in business, and students and whatever, environmental studies, different things. So that's a different approach. It's sort of a more problem-solving approach. That's one way you could do it. Another way is having sort of site-based courses. So another thing York has, it has a summer semester in Costa Rica. And in their site there, it's housed on land that's owned by mostly, all surrounded by cooperatives, agricultural cooperatives. And they have working relationships with these cooperatives because it's a conservation center. It's also where they develop their own brand of coffee with these cooperatives. So you have these different types of site-based courses where students can go and actually meet people working in cooperatives. And then there's internship programs as well, and those may also go across different programs. So there's different things we could do along those sides. I don't really want to talk so much about programs within universities as across universities. And this is more of a challenge because in principle, students from one university could take courses at another. That's really difficult. Students have to be really committed. They really have to know about these things. We could do a better job of, promoting cooperatives and that are different institutions do. And if students want a summer course somewhere in an interesting place, we might be able to drive them there. The question is, do we have sort of inter-university programs where we can support tours and things which students from different universities could be fed into? For the co-op sector, of course, everybody wants to go to Mondragon or Italy or things like that. Is there a way that we could cooperate in which different universities might be able to give credit to students who want to do those types of things? And then there's the whole question of inter-university competitions, and that's what I really want to talk about today. And what do we mean by that? What students get in business schools typically is opportunities to participate in practical ways which they like, which build teamwork, which give them rewards, let them put things on their CVs. And those are things like case competitions, right? And there's a lot of big case competitions. Ivory holds a big one every year with students from about 32 institutions now from around the world. McGill also holds one. There's all sorts of them in the US. So one thing, we could try to inject co-op content into those. I think that would be very, very difficult, but one could do that. But the big question for us is why we don't have a national case study program. Now, for a couple of years at CASC, we did have a bit of this because we got a bit of funding through University of Saskatchewan from a foundation in the US. And that was an interesting experiment. We got a bunch of students who came. Some were very interested. Some wanted a trip, I think. But it was a good thing, but it wasn't very well developed and it wasn't very systematic. So the question is whether we, as an organization, at CASC, can sort of promote like a national case study program or competition, and whether some of the large co-ops, heaven forbid, cooperators, Van City, others might want to sponsor this. CMC should probably be integrated in this, but also there's possibilities of working with student organizations. And there's a lot of business student organizations which are national and they have local chapters, and they often have a social mission of some sort or an entrepreneurial mission. So things like Enactus, ISEC, and others. An individual business schools might also want to sponsor this. And that's the question is whether you have it at the same university every year, whether you could rotate it and things like that. But that would make us present in a way on other universities in which we don't have large membership if we're working through these student organizations. And these student organizations are responsible for organizing these every year. So it's a great event for them. And they can do all sorts of things, right? And put on the resumes that they organized this, and they can do all of the sort of organizing it and the events that bring students together. A similar situation happens around pitch competitions. There aren't as many of those, and most of those are not at universities. Queen's University has a pitch competition every year, though, for example. So we should be thinking about what we can learn from these and whether we should be having like a national co-op pitch competition. And then who would we be partnering with? Maybe with the co-op zone, the co-op innovation fund, other co-op funds, whether again, Van City or others, universities and business schools. And again, these same types of student organizations who are interested in entrepreneurship, but also tend to have some sort of social mandate. And again, what this does is it gets us into sites where we don't otherwise have a presence. And it links us up to a much broader population than we're currently able to reach. So potential allies in universities, there's innovation centers. We never talk to people in innovation centers. If we had a competition, which we could let them know about, that gives them an entree into talking to students about different ways to develop their startups, for example. All sorts of people within universities, but across and outside universities, we need to be talking to cooperatives, about internships and placements, but also as sponsors for these types of programs. The Cooperative Association should be helping to recruit cooperatives who want to do that. And then there's all sorts, again, of these student associations. And again, there's the business students associations, but there's all sorts of other student organizations, especially your more social justice, your environmental organizations as well. And some of those are also national in scope, right? And so you can work through their chapters, and you may not get every chapter submitting or something like this. You get 2 or 3 from those organizations. That's not a bad start. And it opens up an understanding to them about different possibilities. So the next steps, one question is whether CASC should have some sort of subcommittee to explore these types of things. I shouldn't say we should have exploratory discussions maybe with CMC. I think I may have somewhat under the table started those with 1 or 2 people. We should have potential co-op sponsors. We should talk to people who have actual experience in facilitating these types of case competitions in different schools. And we should start reaching out to those student organizations. And eventually that's going to leave us to Education Cooperative Sans Frontières. I put that in for Claude André because I thought he was hosting, but since he's not, I guess that might be not as interesting a thing to consider. I'm going to stop there. And we're going to go into questions. So there's just a few of us here. So if you want to turn on your mic and your camera, you can ask questions or comments. Judith.
Hello, thanks everyone for those presentations. I teach a Practicum course as well, and I'm teaching a course at Stony Mountain with guys who are in medium and minimum security. And we have students that come in from the university to study with the guys inside. And they're really interested in a business course. So I think Marty Donkervert and I are going to teach a co-op course in there. And it's kind of interesting because when we talk about different cultures, well, there's a culture in the prison. And there's a lot of understanding about how to get along with other people. So I find it really interesting from that perspective. And we're even talking about designing an art, poetry, writing zine that would be a cooperative in Stony Mountain. Anyway, that's kind of fun. But I also wanted to say something about the relationship between the university and the community and outside organizations, and the fact that, the case in Bologna, the university is very connected to organizations. And I kind of feel like the university needs to get out there and have a better partnership with people, with organizations, instead of saying we're going to bring our students out there. Why don't we have something that's more organized, that looks at a partnership where organizations outside are working with us on this, and who are, I just saw the case of in Manchester, they have a huge database that they use for their practicums. And the organizations, community organizations are just on an equal basis with the university and the colleges. And, they're better connected, and the practicums are really effective and useful for both parties. Anyway, just thought there should be a better connection, a better link between the university and organizations outside. So the university is in the community more than it has been. Just an observation.
Okay. Other questions, or anyone want to comment on that? My experience with that, Judith, is that universities are composed of silos within silos within silos. And those silos aren't made of straw, they're sort of made of cast iron often. And so unless you get somebody who sort of rose up to positions of power where they're sort of at the top of some of those silos, it's hard to work across those. But you never know what you can do till you try. So for example, we're talking with John about this course that we offer across a bunch of different programs, which brings in students from different things. We never thought that would happen, but somebody was able to do that, right? I think it works the same with outside relationships with cooperatives and placements. So one of the things at York, the problem was there's placements, but most, or internships rather, but most social economy organizations can't afford to pay those. So one of our past deans raised some funds to provide paid internships, but only for people in the social economy organization. So the social economy organization didn't have to pay for the internship, it was paid, which means that you're not only going to an internship if you're working for a large corporation, right? So I think there's things we can do, but it's a challenge. Yeah. Other questions, thoughts?
There's one in the chat.
Oops, is there? Sorry,
Yeah,
my
that one's
monitoring
for me.
skills.
That one's for
Okay,
me, Darryl.
why don't you just say it then,
I
Fiona?
will. So I'm just wondering, is there a way to insert ourselves into an already existing case study competition or pitch competition, so that we could maybe learn off the backs of how they run it, all slicked out and everything, as well as inserting the co-op example right in line with everything else, and instead of us launching something from ground up. I'm just wondering.
Well, do you know the dean of the business school at Ivy?
I don't. Do I?
I don't know. I don't.
Okay, I don't either.
These business schools are pretty proprietary about those things because it's the way they sell themselves, right?
Okay.
And they have like a long-term relationships with major banks, right? Who are their primary sponsors, or Deloitte and Touche, or people like this. So
we need to get Federated to pony up.
Well, I think, one of the things that we can do, at least to start off with, is not try to do this on site. And COVID provides a wonderful excuse for not doing it that way, right? So now you don't get the same sort of camaraderie and things like people talk about in these case study things, but you could also get a wider audience too. So you could even consider people outside of Canada, for example, or things like that. But we do need to talk to people who run these case studies to figure out how they organize them. And a bunch of other steps there. If we could have some inroads, even through one or two chapters of these organizations like Enactus or ISEC on a specific thing, they could probably, generate at least a couple of applications or things for these cases, right? So I think we need to have a talk about this in cask around and, sort of get certain people to committing at least one application or something from a team at their university. We have to strong arm a few people to do that, right? Whether they already have a class that's what they're teaching and let them know at the beginning of the year, sort of tailor their course a little bit around how you do case studies and things. Yeah, it'd be great if we could tap into those existing ones. I think it's a real challenge. We're running a little bit over time. They're going to kick us out of here at 1:12 or 1:10, I think, or 2:10. I'm sorry, time zone prejudice there is creeping in. But are there any other last thoughts, final thoughts people have or questions?
The other thing I thought was really interesting that kind of crossed over all three is the inserting of someone who may or may not know about co-ops into a co-op or other organization. And as a result, not being maybe privy to the culture of what a co-op is. I think I heard that across and not just like what is a co-op, but actually like how is this actually done and what does this look like and does it match with values that I have and that kind of thing. Like that seems like work that also needs to be done. John, Jennifer.
Yeah. I was going to ask Jennifer if she could elaborate sort of on that point when she was listing the negative potential like problems with these types of placements and
we haven't had too much because we tend to the students tend broadly to go to nonprofits, but our student body in the adult education and community development program, we're a very kind of critical program. You can see it on our website. So students, if they're applying to our program, they know they bring certain values with them, generally speaking. And so you don't have to teach them about social justice. You don't have to teach them about gender equity and those sorts of things because they're already there, to a large extent. However, going into these workplaces is something extra because it's, they still may not have ever worked in a cooperative workplace before. They may have just, as whatever their employment history was. But we do also have a whole branch called Workplace Learning and Social Change. So those students who courses learn the cooperative approach and the values and that sort of stuff. But a lot of students don't take those, and so I think there's it's a very, from my experience, it's usually a very positive relationship, but it can be a bit mixed if they're not immersed in the culture of those particular, in the cultures of nonprofits that have no money, in the cultures of cooperative, which are horizontal workplaces, and in the cultures of some of these other organizations. If they work at a hospital or U of T, they tend to be pretty hierarchical. So yeah, it does vary a lot, and ways of, there should be ways of preparing students for those experiences.
Yeah, our program is a bit different. I think we attract students who are attracted to the business, in the name at first, and so we try to work through that, what that means with them over the next 3 or 4 years to get them to think about business a bit differently. I think that's been the objective of the program. But even by the time they can be reading about co-ops, they can be reading about fair trade, but until they actually start working in these organizations, they don't really understand what that might mean, what that practically means, and so that's what I mean. Like they come to the placement course with varying degrees of sort of alignment with the values, and some students are already ready to embrace that. And I think, Jennifer, you mentioned that students in your program, they find their own placements, right? And so in our case, it's sort of we have to match them up with existing. The paperwork has to be done in advance, and there's a lot of administrative paper that needs to be filled out, and then we line them up together. And so sometimes if it isn't quite that good, in other cases, like the values, it's hard for them to see through their own sort of histories of experience with work, how this is any different sometimes, right? That they're being told to go put up some posters, do this marketing campaign, and this the kind of relationship. And the other thing too is very important is the supervising, extremely important. I think we put sometimes we don't have a choice of who's we don't always find the right people to do this. So people are overstretched. Darryl, I think, was on sabbatical and he was supervising students, in the Green Campus Cooperative, and it's too much in some cases to ask someone to do that. So that's a challenging part too, for sure.
Sorry, everyone, power went off there briefly. Before we leave, Carl, I was just wondering if you had any comments that you could share with us from a little.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm listening with interest to what's being said, and one of the ways that we went around it and we're looking at is to bring in the cooperatives into the school, into the university, and that's what I spoke about earlier, Darryl, when we were together in the other session about organizing what we call a hackathon. So we get the students to focus on a specific issue or a range of issues which relate to cooperatives or social enterprises, not always necessarily just cooperatives, as we break them down. And that opens up a lot of things, because when cooperatives see what we do and what the students can do, that can also provide a way of getting internships. We also have a system at our business school when the final year of masters, they're on what we call in French alternance. So they're 2 weeks in a company and 1 week in the school over the whole year. So there are things obviously which can be done, and that also produces at the same time lots of case studies. So we rework all the case studies of what's been done and solutions which have been provided, and then we reboot that back into the system, and that provides a little bit of food for thought on an ongoing basis. But I will agree, it's not always easy, and you've got to have that right match between the students who actually want to look at those sectors. They are out there. Companies there are, and as some of you have mentioned, they're so small that sometimes they want to participate, but they don't have the resources to participate. So obviously we did the last session via Teams and Zoom, and that worked fantastic because people were still in their little offices and companies and whatever, and participating with us at the same time. So yeah, just thought I could share that with you.
Thanks, Carl. That's good, and we're so delighted to have you at CAST this year, because these are the types of inputs we need from outside. I'm going to stop now because we're going to be kicked off in about 1 minute or less. So thanks everybody. But again, this was recorded, so it'll be on the Congress website to the end of June, and then maybe Judith, we'll have a strategy by then on whether we're archiving all of these things, right?
Yeah, we will.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.